Thank you. Good afternoon. Oh, they've missed the first slide off. That's handy. I'll come to that later on. I'm going to cover three things today to affect healthcare lighting in terms of just general lighting. I call them fads and facts, but you can decide for yourself. That's the first slide. Question to you all is, what's the most important sense that we have as a human? Is it your hearing? Is it your taste? Is it your touch? Is it your sight? It always amazes me that we never look after our eyes, and we always try and find the cheapest solution for lighting, which can damage our eyes, and that's the one thing I want to cover today. Like that. So, covered off today, should you take my advice? Who am I? I'm just a guy that walked in off the street, literally 5 minutes ago. How can lighting design affect a space? Should we use natural or artificial light? Talk about some of the key factors we use now when measuring light. It's always been the case, only the lay public have just suddenly realised it. Then talk about some actual fads and facts, LEDs, biodynamics, lighting controls, and sort of get rid of a few myths. And then come back to some key points to remember taking forward from the presentation. Who am I? Oh, he's rather handsome. I've been designing lights and lighting for over 20 years. I launched my own business 4 years ago because of my customers were saying, do it. And I specialise in residential care because of that, and my work with dementia and a few other, shall we say, brain issues. I became an SBID accredited partner and also sit on the SBID Healthcare Council. The design dilemma we're always presented with is not, I want you to design something, it is, we've got a project and it's not quite right, can you fix it? Well, they normally come back with, we don't have enough light. Well, how much light do you need? How much is more light? Typically, for the elderly, for those with dementia, Alzheimer's, and for some epilepsy, it's typically 1.5 to 2 times the normal value. So in a corridor, if it's 100 lux, we want 150 to 200 lux. When do we need the light? For some reason, we think we need it all the time. We don't. That can change throughout the day, but also change with occupancy and the level of occupancy. When does it change? Well, when there's a space transition, or we want to use the biodynamics. What people mainly forget is not everywhere has to be lit to the maintained illuminance. For example, a care home design to the gold standard for Sterling says that it must be 600 lux in a living room. Actually, it needs to be 600 lux around the chair where people sit. It only needs to be 150 to 300 lux everywhere else. So task lighting to supplement that is important. So how do we achieve more light? We do make some cardinal mistakes. However, we need to consider where we are within the build. Here's a pre-build design. We actually helped design the building with this one. You'll notice there's a good window ratio. Lots of windows in this particular building. We have a really good transition from the exterior entrance into the interior. So we allow the light to bleed away rather than have a step change in flux. Everybody makes a mistake in stairwells. They think it's the biggest trip hazard. However, non-uniformly lit corridors are a bigger trip hazard to the elderly. Finally, you'll notice I've put well-being enhancement lighting. I'll come to that in a bit. So natural light. It's a bit obvious, isn't it, really? Double the window space, you get double the light. But people are quite surprised to see how much light you get through a very small window. So it is vitally important that we increase window space. As interior designers and lighting designers, we always want to make sure we use warm tones and a good colouring index. Now, the average rendering value of a lamp, we've already told to be more than 80. That will give us good true colour. However, with LEDs, there is a problem that you can have an RA of 90, but the red channel is as low as 8. 8 out of 100 isn't that good. And that means that all of our reds, oranges, browns and yellows all merge into one. The other thing we have a problem with is the CCT, the correlated colour temperature. People mix it up. Do they want 4,000, 3,000, 2,700? They simply don't know because they're used to buying tungsten lamps or fluorescent lights. Here's an example of 4 different CRIs at 2,700 Kelvin. You'll notice there's far more yellow visible on the left. And this is particularly important for older people as their eyes deteriorate. Now, colour contrast. There is no artificial light used in that room, but look at the difference between the two spaces. just by changing the floor colour and the background colour of the paint. Now, if you remember the opening slide, one of the problems that we have with visibility is the lack of contrast. If we improve contrast, we can make reading easier. We can get a person with Alzheimer's to read things a lot more simpler. The biggest mistake we make is the mistake I've made here. The text is in black, the background's in white. If we put the background in black and the text in white, a person with dementia can read that a lot easier. In the pursuit of flux, so if we want more light, you ask the electrician, he'll run away, come back with some downlights. I think there's, I don't know, something like 30 there or something. Downlights at £20 each. It's hit the target for the price, but unfortunately there's too much glare. Now with that, what happens is, if you've got anybody with any macular degeneration, they're going to really suffer with that, of their vision. Certainly somebody with glaucoma won't be able to see, and also a person who's in their late teens, early 20s that's helping an elderly resident will get a headache by the end of the day. So product selection. This is something we get asked quite a bit. We don't want to use LEDs because they're still being developed. Or we want to use LEDs because they're the only things that work, they're efficient, they're cheap, and they don't emit heat. Well, LED lighting is here to stay, I'm glad to say. And it is efficient, it's long-lasting, it's extremely reliable, providing you spend the money on the fittings. Developments are still being made, and we're going to approach the 220 lumens per watt mark soon, off the chip, but not out of the fittings. But we've utilised white LED light for a number of years, probably 6 years, where it's actually been beneficial and worthwhile. But you do get what you pay for within reason. The biggest misnomer is all LEDs emit heat. You cannot create light without heat. The good, the bad, and the ugly of this are how you get rid of that heat. The good one takes the heat away from the fitting completely, it dissipates it in a good manner, and never reaches its heat saturation point. The bad ones reach heat saturation, and they deteriorate the phosphors, so you get colour shift. The ugly ones deteriorate the phosphors on the LEDs themselves, and also burn out the fitting. And you'll notice that by staining the ceiling and damaging the decor. The biggest thing to remember is if you're refurbishing a property, what you don't want to do is mix LED with compact fluorescent. What will happen is you'll burn out the lamp straight away. The drivers will fail. They are not as resilient as compact fluorescent ballasts. An operational design dilemma is people say, oh, I've got all the lighting in, but it's not quite right for all the purposes. Maybe we need to change the lights or add controls. Well, where do you start? It depends what light you've got in as to whether or not we can change the controls. It might need a complete redesign, it might need a complete refurb. But some people go forward for a central building management system because they've been told that's the right thing to do. However, local controls are often easier to install, a lot less to commission. The maintenance costs are actually lower than the CMS people claim, and their site adaptation is a lot easier because you can extend them very quickly. With the central building management system, yes, we can do all of that, but it costs a lot of money and time. Just be careful of that. And the FAD alert here, for God's sakes, please don't put a gateway connected system on, not onto a commercial property or a residential retirement place. The reason being is Google, Alexa, or whoever you want to call her, does not understand how to control everything. And half the automations they show you on the adverts do not actually work. Okay? We've got one particular client that decided to turn all the lights on at dusk and dawn. Alexa doesn't know when dusk and dawn is, so it doesn't work. Okay? The easiest way to control lights is to have multiple lighting circuits to create the scenes. It's very cost effective. If you want to add dimming, then you can use a control bus like Dali or 1 to 10 volt. Whatever you do not use leading edge, you will create flicker, and a lot of flicker, some of it perceptible, some of it imperceptible. However, they all have the same effect and cause psychotic episodes in people with epilepsy. Automatic switching is very good, it's beneficial, it almost gives us a direct proportional saving on energy. However, if you've got somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's, automatic switching of lights can be quite spooky for them and can freak them out. So to avoid those episodes, we actually ask people to have an override facility for those people. In any personal spaces, allow personalisation. I'm different from you, you're different from your spouse, and so on. Everybody wants to tailor their own environment, so allow for that ability. It's quite easy by using a switch or a remote control button. Circadian rhythm, the latest buzzword. Something works, we're not quite sure what. I hear these claims all the time. It's proven to assist with biodynamic control, it's proven to be beneficial to the elderly, it's proven to help with sleep patterns and eating disorders. That's daylight. Global daylight on the left, northern hemisphere on the right. If you look at that colour temperature range, there isn't a single light fitting on the market today that does all that colour temperature range. Now, when you've got 100,000 lux outside your window, and you've got big windows, because we've told you to put big windows in, and it's flooding into your building, how is that going to be able to be overridden by the lighting you've got in the building giving you 300 lux? Okay? Be careful of the claims being made by Circadian Rhythm. All the evidence, and I mean all the evidence, Circadian Rhythm lighting works. It resets your hypothalamus and gets your biorhythms really wonderfully back to 24 hours a day. However, that is in a completely darkened space. The best thing for you is to go outside for 15 minutes every day and reset your hypothalamus naturally. The most important thing. Big issues that we do have with Circadian Rhythm lighting, cheaper systems, which mostly people will buy because they don't want to pay the all expensive ones that do really work really well, they have a problem with colour shift, rendering shift. And what happens is a design that's been put into a wall or a floor suddenly disappears or can actually look like a black hole. So those with dementia think it is actually physically a hole and try stepping over it, fall over, is a trip hazard. Increased light levels produce the same effect at a fraction of the cost. There's quite a bit of research out at the moment that shows that if you increase the light flux to 2,500 2,500 lux for an hour and a half before lunch, elderly people who have been declining in their food mechanism, in their eating, will actually increase their eating, which means that they become more nourished, they become more competent, they actually require less drugs, therefore less attention from staff. So it becomes more cost effective just by adding a bit of extra light for an hour and a half a day before lunch. That research is probably going to carry on for another 3 years before we see the full results, but early indications are it's very beneficial for a very small cost. But nothing is a substitute for natural daylight, exercise, a healthy diet, and regular sleep patterns. That is the biggest impact on the elderly sleeping in a residential home. So, key points to remember. Consider the occupants. The amount of times I've seen a sterling dementia gold standard home designed for just the residents. There are people working in that home, and if it's designed incorrectly, the younger the person, the more time they'll have off sick through headaches because of the overlighting and the glare that has been there just to set a particular lux level. More natural daylight, please. The more we can use of that, the better we'll all be, and the better our competence. And also, I've missed off that, airflow. I did a talk recently, and the biggest thing there was about oxygen intake, where we don't have enough of that. That can be actually used as part of the building control system to improve cognizance. High colour rendering. Check out your LEDs. If your LEDs aren't any good, I'm not saying they will be, but you need to check the average rendering value and try and get it above 90. That way you'll know your red channel is going to be good and you'll get a full colour consistency. Higher contrast in your designs. Stop people from falling over, missing the chairs. There's a reason why care home chairs have different colour arms to seats, to backs. That's so people with poor eyesight can actually see the difference in plane, so they don't sit on an arm or fall over it. Use low glare products. This is my biggest concern at the moment. Every time we go to a site to put it right, it's because they've put down lights in for £5. And you cannot see where you're going, not because it's underlit, but because it's overglared. And lighting controls with overrides to personalised spaces, that's important. What we're trying to do is we're trying to change people's perception, to provide flexibility of use and longevity of design through using high quality sources. It doesn't have to be expensive, just high quality. Thank you for listening.